Welcome to Communications from Home, my weekly live stream show here at Star Nations. And I gotta do one thing here. I always forget this part. Hope this is the right one. There we go. That way has my name on it. Okay. Yay. Hey, everybody. I'm so glad to be back. Tonight is June 29th and Tuesday, June 29th. And guess what? I wasn't here last week because I was busy resting up so I could get ready to pack up to go camping in the RV. And so tonight I'm back and I'm so glad to be here with you guys. The topic of the show tonight is about our spirit and our brain. And I have to tell you that how this topic came to me, I was busy, just offloading the camper, getting things put away. And I was thinking on Sundays, I haven't even done anything for the show on Tuesday night. So what are we doing? And I'm talking to my team, right? What are we talking about? And it clear as day, like somebody standing right next to me said thalamus. And it's like, thalamus? Wow. Okay. So as I was thinking about it and going, okay, so what about the thalamus? What about the thalamus? I had to go back to and reflect on my recent class that I taught, Journey of Remembering, last week. No, the week before, June 17th through the 20th. And there's some information in there about the brain and about connecting the brain and the heart, right? And there's a piece in there that we talk about the brain, but I don't really go into big detail about what the pituitary, the pineal glands, and the thalamus and the hippocampus and all of that stuff plays into our soul growth, right? So that's what we're talking about tonight. And I have to admit, this is the nerdy part that I just really love about the stuff that I teach and share about. And so I'm hoping you guys will bear with me in the nerdiness tonight. I got to check to make sure we are live. We are. Yay. Good to see that. And by the way, if you wouldn't mind, because I looked at my phone, otherwise I forget. If you wouldn't mind liking and sharing the video, it would really be helpful to share it with other people because it puts us in the logarithm stuff with Facebook. You know how that works. Actually, nobody knows how that works. Okay, so tonight's show, yay, is all about the brain and the spirit. So let's get started. Oh, we got a couple of people here I just want to say hi to. Julie Shumway Hills in the house. Hello, Julie. Good to have you here. Hola, Roberto. ¿Cómo estás? Yo hablo y comparatia. Oh, yeah. I do Spanish, but I'm not fluent with it. Can you tell? Loved and shared. Yay. Thank you, Julie. Thank you so much. I'm so happy. I'm too cool for all. Too cool for all. Oh my God. Well, that is true. That is true. Okay. So here is some good information about our brain and our heart and what the brain has to do with our spiritual growth, right? The question that I asked in the promotion of the show was, I'm going to scroll up to it, make sure I say it the way I wrote it to begin with, is, what does your physical brain have to do with your spirit and spirituality? Yeah. Hopefully that took somebody to pause just a moment and say, what? Some people would say that it has nothing to do with spiritual growth or our spirituality. And others would say it's either we're in our heads too much or not enough, right? And so it's that questioning about, am I out of balance? Am I imbalanced? Am I grounded? Am I not grounded? And it has all to do with that. Now, here's this, is that when our spirit decided that we wanted to have this experience here on earth in a physical body, right? We had to write up our soul contract and figure out what we wanted to learn, how we wanted to learn it, who our parents are going to be, what people or spirits in our soul group were going to be involved in our contract, right? So it sounds like a lot, But as a spirit, I would like to hope that it goes a lot faster than if, as humans, we sit down and try to work it all out and all the outlines and all of that. But in order for us to be here, right, we have to be blessed by the Creator to be here. In other words, our soul contract is approved, stamped with approval, so that we could be here. And because we do that, and our spirit comes into a physical body, right? We have to know about our physical body and how it correlates, how it corresponds, how it helps us in our journey here, in our earth experience. So when we decided to come to this particular planet, it's all about polarity, right? It's all about right and wrong, good and bad. We see it so often, male, female, all of that. And it's a PhD level school. This is not an elementary school by any stretch. And I think that we can all agree on that one, right? And so when we come into this physical body, there's our entire body is assisting us as the vehicle to experience the physical world, right? And also the non-physical world. And so when we come into the body, and we are getting situated, our spirit is getting acclimated, right, into this physicalness. We may, and because I don't know for sure, we may, as a spirit, when we come in, already know all the ins and outs and to's and fro's and all the glands and all the stuff that's going on in this physical body, because it's complicated. Whether you're male or female, we have a complicated body. Some would say female bodies, physical bodies, are more complicated than guys. And in some respects we are, because we also have to carry a fetus to be able to give birth, right, to a human baby. So we have all of that going on too. So when our spirit comes into our body, knowing the vehicle and knowing how to drive the vehicle, right, and how to access its capabilities. And as the human part, when we have gotten amnesia, when we don't remember our spirit, our soul self leading the way and trying to reconnect, right? Trying to touch, trying to understand our higher selves. And hopefully we're including it all as a whole being rather than bits and pieces. But most of us start out looking at ourselves as bits and pieces. And then we spend a long time trying to pull it all together, right? And so we're going to talk about the brain, because we could spend hours and hours and hours just on the brain alone. So that's why my team wanted me just to focus in on the thalamus and what that is and how it helps us. Okay, so let me say hi to a couple people here first. And that is Jocelyn's here. Hello there, lady. Good to have you here. And look who else is in the house but Kara Blummer. It's good to see you. Oh, it was so good, you guys. So good to meet face to face some of the people that have been longtime listeners in the class, Journey of Remembering, and spend some time together, right? It was so good. It made me happy. I was so happy, Karen. And then there's Rochelle. Hello, Rochelle. What do you mean you can't get me? I'm on your site, blah, blah, blah. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. I hope you can figure it out. Amy's here too. Hello, Amy. Amy and I have known each other for years. Hello, Amy. It's good to have you in the house. Hope you're feeling better. Rob is here, of course. The new age has no use for it. Well, there's some people who would say that, right, Rob? There's some people. Oh, yay, Rochelle's here. She's in the house. Judy's here too. Hello, Judy. Good to have you here. And Clara's here too. She says, hi from West Dallas. Neat topic to hear about. Yes. Clara's one of my Wisconsin peeps. Yeah. Okay. So, and I had to write down some notes because there was so much, right? There's so much. And first of all, when I was considering all of this and how it would go together and how could we share about this in a understandable way, right? So In the Journey of Remembering class, one of the many intentions was to assist the students in remembering the connection between their mind and their heart. That means their thoughts and their emotions, right? So, in this class, this particular class that I teach, we do a lot, and I mean a lot of meditation. And in one of the meditations, I forgot to put my phone on do not disturb. Hang on, guys. Let me do that. Otherwise, we're going to get disturbed. We don't want that. Okay. All right. I forgot. Okay, so in this class, it's all about the meditations that we do to connect the mind and the heart. Okay, and in one of the meditations, they're guided meditations. In one of the meditations, I ask the students to imagine what it would be like to be in the center of their head, their physical head. Okay, what would that be like? To be at the center of the head near the pineal gland, which is kind of right in the dead in the center, but the thalamus is actually the dead center. Okay, the very center of your head, your physical head. And I ask them to imagine what it'd be like to be surrounded by the soft tissue of the brain and noticing the harder bone of the skull. Okay. And the reason why we do that is because we do spend a lot of time in our minds. We're built to do that. We're remembering. It's part of our journey here is to remember what that balance is between the head and the heart, the connection between the two, right? And so there are some people, yes, and they could be new age spiritual people who spend a lot of their time either, in their hearts or in their emotions, right? I'm thinking about those early days in the 70s, 80s, right? When a lot of it was whispered and secret, and we weren't really talking about it the way we are today, out loud, amongst strangers sometimes. And so when we remember where we're starting out, right? And here's another little piece is that when the world fell, right? When we fell at the fall of Atlantis, we fell from our hearts into our minds. And I know it's kind of counterdictive, or if it's like we're moving up from our hearts to our minds. And we have spent generations really spending a lot of time in our minds. And it's in recent times, modern times, is that we're asking those philosophical and spiritual questions. Who am I? What am I here for? What is my life all about? Right? We begin asking those questions. So one of the things that I know that we have spent a great deal of time on as a spiritual group is that we spent a lot of time discussing and reading about the pineal gland and the third eye chakra, right? So I think that we have a relatively good understanding about that. But I haven't found a whole lot of writings or even discussion about the thalamus and its connection to our spiritual and our spirit. I don't know. Have you guys heard much about the thalamus and your spiritual growth? I'm curious. If you have, please let me know in the comments. Yeah, because I'm always looking. I'm always reading stuff. And so if there's more information, I would love to have it and to be able to digest it, bring it in, right? Okay, here's this. The thalamus, where is it located? We know it's in our head. We know it's in our brain, but where is it? And did you know that the thalamus, the word, it's anthology, it's in the Greek language, and it means the inner chamber. Thalamus means in Greek the inner chamber. Now I sat with that one for a little bit, thinking, and because when I teach about the tiny space of the heart and the sacred space of the heart, we say that it's the holiest place on earth. right? It's interesting that the Greeks would call the thalamus, which is in the center of the brain, the inner chamber. So the thalamus is located really deep in the brain. It's in the cerebral cortex and is situated, it sits right on top of the brainstem. Okay. It's a symmetrical gland. In other words, it has two sides to it and they're identical in shape. All right. And I am going to get you a picture of this. I've got a couple. Which one to use? I think we're going to use this one. We're going to use this one. And we're going to give it a solo so that you guys can really take a look at this. Okay. Whoops. I didn't want to do that. Okay, we're going to do that. And there it is. There we go. And we're going to take off the branding so it doesn't show over that. There we go. All right. So here is the entire brain picture. Okay. I know it's a lot to look at. But here, right in the middle, down, you can see where the lower part of the brain, right? The brain stem, kind of right in the lower center part. And just above where it says pons, there's kind of a big bulb there. Just above that is the thalamus. It's that round, kind of egg-shaped right in the center of the brain. Okay, so between the thalamus and the very top of your vertebrae, the C1 vertebrae, is a couple of things. And the hippocampus is one of them. The medulla oblongata is part of that. The pineal gland is in there too. There's a lot of stuff in there. There really is. But the thalamus is right in the center. The pineal gland is a very, very small gland. The very small gland. It's right behind, it looks like in this picture, but it's very small. Some description of that says that it's about the size of a rice, but it might be a little bit bigger than that. But the thalamus is that large oblong shaped, almost egg shaped, right in the center. Okay. Yeah. And let's see. I have one more that might be a little bit more helpful. All right. So in this picture, you have the thalamus, which is right there in the center. It's kind of got a white dot on it. That white dot is the choroid plexus. No, I'm sorry, not the choroid plexus, but that right there in the center, that oblong piece is the thalamus. That blue dot, tiny little blue dot behind it and a little bit lower is the pineal gland. Okay. Spinal cord goes up into the medulla or the brain stem, right? Right here in the purple. And the thalamus sits right on top of the brain stem. Interesting, isn't it? Okay, so now you kind of get an idea. Where in the heck is that thalamus? So right at the top of where the brainstem is, in the back of your head, right, just below the occipital bun, you can kind of feel like a little dent there, right? It's sitting right in there, right behind. Honestly, just a little anatomy, just so you guys can get a gist of where is this thalamus and why do we need it, for goodness sake, right? And so the thalamus it's located really deep inside the brain, the physical brain. And its job Get this, its job is to process information going to and from the spinal cord into the brain. Okay. And it's kind of like the information hub. So it takes in all the information from the many different senses that we have, our basic senses, the 5. It takes it in, right? And then it sends out that information to the different glands and aspects of the brain, because it's kind of digesting it and taking it in, saying, okay, where do you go? And then it sends it to that information to the different parts of the brain that will send it to different parts of our body. And it regulates our sleep cycles, our consciousness, whether we're awake, whether we're alert. And that information that it sends it to the bigger part of the brain, the cerebrum. Okay. And then the thing is that in that, how do I want to say this? In those regulating our sleep cycles, that's a circadian rhythm. Yeah, that's one of the many functions the thalamus does. And it organizes even our subconscious and our conscious information. And some would say that it actually regulates the very survival of our being, of our physicalness. Isn't it interesting? When I was reading this stuff, I was thinking, holy smokes, no wonder why my team wanted me to bring this information to you. Now, some of you might have already had this. And if you do, let us know in the comments your thoughts on this, okay? Because it's the conversation. And I wish we were in person, because I love these kinds of conversations about this spiritual information, taking our everyday kind of stuff and even more complex information like this, and seeing how it correlates and corresponds with our spiritual growth. All right. Yeah. And so Rob is saying, no, he hasn't heard anything about that. And Judy said, no, I have not. Oh my gosh. Okay. And so Rob says the Greeks likely didn't name it, but Greek is the lingua franca of the Western medicine, which much like Latin is in the legal profession. Probably true. But I just found it really fascinating that it meant inner chamber, kind of tuck that away because it's going to come back out. Hey, Deborah, good to have you here, Deb. Judy says, I'll have to look it up later. Okay. Rob says, I know very little about neurology, bioneurology. Okay. Actually, see, I told you this is going to get nerdy. I love researching this stuff and figuring it out and how does this really go together. So remember about the information that the thalamus brings in. It's the information hub. It's taking in all of the information that our eyes, ears, nose, fingertips, right? And all of that comes in to that hub. And it's just information, bits of information. There's no emotions attached to it yet. Literally, it's a sorting. And when it comes to the emotions, that is where it kind of gets interesting. Okay. All right. So, so one of the many functions is that the thalamus does is the circadian rhythm. It maintains consciousness, organizes subconscious information, and regulates the very survival, right? So one of the places that it sends information is to the cerebral cortex. And that part of our brain is responsible for all of our higher order functions, okay? Such as sensations, perception, our memory, how we associate things, thoughts, and even our voluntary physical action, or how our muscles move. Okay, I know. Now, when I was going over all this information, what I was thinking is, we have a very highly created body, physical body, to be the vehicle for our spirit. and how all these intricates work together. It's amazing. And so the spirit or the spirituality of the brain, and the thalamus to be specific, there's one of the key structures in the brain that is physically changed through that changes the thalamus. And many of us have done this and is still doing it or maybe beginning to do it. And that's meditation. It's the one thing that science can say actually changes the thalamus. It's almost like upgrading it, like when we do a software upgrade, kind of like that. Or when we get the newer model kind of thing, right? So the meditation, and why the meditation helps our thalamus, is because it's calming. We're not taking in a whole lot of information from our physical world. Even though some of us say that we have this monkey mind and won't shut up kind of thing, and we can't meditate and whatever, right? Even with that, just the fact that we slow down just a little bit, and we might focus on our breath, we might focus on nature, calms us down, right? In my classes, we wear a mask, a mindfold mask that covers our eyes. And I was telling my class, when I first started using it, it actually helped me to because it blocks out all of the physical eye stimulation, what comes through our physical eyes, right? And so when we meditate, it calms everything down. And so our thalamus is taking in other information that our body is bringing in, but it's not through all of our basic senses, right? It might still be through the hearing and the smelling, our nose, the olfactory, might be some of that, but it's also taking in what we subconsciously don't realize that we're taking in. And some of that is coming through our clairs. Yeah. And here's the other thing. It's with the thalamus, it's only taking in information. It's not putting any kind of good, bad, or anything like that on it at all. Okay? It's just taking information and saying, okay, this goes over there, this one goes there, right? And so here's the thing, is that it doesn't really discriminate on what we call real or not real. Right? Physical, it takes in both the physical and non-physical. It takes in the physical from our physical world, but it also takes in light language, the stuff that we don't see with the naked eye, right? Yeah. So when we go into meditation, we can physically change how our thalamus takes in information. Interesting. I found that fascinating. So the thalamus acts as the relay station for all of the sensory information that flows through the brain and recognizes the different signal input. So both in the physical and the non-physical. Huh. All right. So here's the other thing that the thalamus does, is that when it takes in that information to send it to the other parts of the brain, it will start categorizing what kind of emotion, not feeling, emotion that could be attached to that piece of information. Okay, so the thalamus gives emotional meaning not only to what we take in through our basic senses, but it could be the key to developing our higher senses, which will ultimately expand our concepts of our spirituality, our connection to the Creator. Okay, so what happens is that the feeling that's attached to the emotion, right, that comes later. But the thalamus, what it's going to do is it's going to start categorizing it and sending that information to the different parts of the brain to take that information and do the next thing with it. Okay. Interesting, isn't it? Oh my gosh, there's just so much. All right. Rob is saying someone did name it based on that, but likely much later. Probably, probably. Rochelle said, I thoroughly enjoy learning about the brain. Me too. I do. I think that's why I went into psychology, actually. Julie says, I use my mindfold every morning during my meditation. Oh, good for you, Julie. Yay. Good for you. I still find it helpful after all these years. Yeah. When I'm not home and I'm like in the RV and I'm trying to do a meditation, I use my mindfold too. It kind of helps to block out all that other stuff. All right. So, in the center area of our brain, the thalamus, it plays an important role in our spiritual awakening. Yeah. So, all those years ago, right, when we began our spiritual journey in a conscious way, the thalamus was a big part of that because we were taking in information and we're going, what about this? Or what about that? I didn't know that. I want to look into that piece a little bit deeper. What's this meditation stuff about? Right? Yeah. And so we start making other decisions. That's about the thalamus being very helpful to us in our spiritual growth. All right. So, oh my gosh, there's so much. All right. So, where the thalamus sits on top of the brainstem is a whole big bundle of nerve fibers. That's where it meets. It's kind of like a confluence. Okay. And in that confluence, there's other glands that reside very close together. So, there's the thalamus right in the center. And then you have the pituitary gland, the hypothalamus, and the pineal gland, and something known as the third ventricle. Now, we're not going to get into all of those, but all of that put together is called something very interesting. It's called the cave of Brahma, Brahma, the cave of Brahma. And I am going to put that, the cave of Brahma. I think that's spelled correctly. I think so. And so that, all those put together is known as the cave of Brahma. So it's a central area of the brain that's associated with, okay, and that is associated with what we call profound insight, spiritual vision, and the higher perceptions and abilities. Okay, all those classes that we take, right? All those times that we're in meditation and we get the nudge from our spiritual teams to go to this class or read that book or, you see, right? Sometimes it doesn't make any sense to us. And it's like, well, okay, I'll take a look at it. And then all of a sudden something will jump out of that information. And it's like connecting the dots and helps us to understand something in a deeper way. Right? Yep, Cave of Brahma. So here's this. And this is what came to me as I was reading through all this information. I was thinking, okay, so the healing of our physical, emotional, and mental traumas, I'm always talking about that. I say it in almost every show, is really important because it allows the reconnection to our, not just to the meanings behind the thalamus, but the thalamus opens up that highway of information, right? Taking those spiritual links and sending them to other parts of our brain. Yeah. So, we say things like heal an emotional trauma, right? We're healing something that broke our heart. divorce, death of a loved one, leaving a job, selling a home or moving, those kinds of things, right? Those kinds of traumas that affect us deeply. And so when we do that kind of healing, yes, it does heal us in a spiritual way, so much so, but it also does so much for our physical well-being. And it kind of, for me, is kind of like a healthy loop, that we get the information to heal this particular trauma. We begin the process of healing the trauma, healing the trauma, healing the trauma. And then as we do those different layers of healing, our physical body also does something. The thalamus begins sending information to other parts of our brain that helps us with our spiritual growth. Amazing. Amazing. I don't know. All right, here's another concept. There's something called the thalamus complex. I know. Okay, so this means that it's where our skull meets the head in the back, right? So right below the occipital bone, you got that little bit of a dent, and you can feel where that first vertebrae is, C1. Okay, and just above C1 is a joint. And that joint is the joint that allows us to move our head in different directions, up and down, sideways. Okay. The thalamus sits right on top of the brainstem at that point. And so it's all of that energy right in the back, and that's called the thalamus complex. Some would say that it's near the ninth chakra. And that ninth chakra is associated with a part of our brain called the medulla oblongata. Do you remember that one from biology class? Medulla oblongata. And it's that part of our anatomy that's also known as the mouth of God or the mouth of goddess. That's where we bring in universal information, universal energy, if you will, light language. Okay, comes through that part. And I'm sure you've heard Polly Jola Bay talk about that part of our physicalness. Okay, and also the spiritual opening back there. And for the students who studied with me, think about those beams of light, right? The beams of light. And I'm going to wait for somebody to go say, "Oh my God," because that is an activation point back there that they actually reconnected during the class. All right. So it's that part of our spiritual and physical bodies that actually helps us to take in the flow of energy, but more importantly is that when it's open, it's connected, it can help us to identify what we're here on earth for. Okay. The flow of energy flows through what's called the Hara line. We also know it as the crystalline tube, where the earth human identity first anchors in to the physical body. And it does have something to do with identifying or remembering why we're here in this particular body at this particular time. See how it all kind of intersects right there in our physical body at the thalamus. So that thalamus is important. It's an important part of our physical anatomy and energetic blueprint. It helps us in transmitting and deciphering intelligent language. It's coming through all of our senses, all of our senses. And here's this, is that since we take in information all the time, 24/7, 365, in our dream time, in our daydreams, all the time. So even when our physical body is sleeping, right? The pineal gland is asleep, not taking in that kind of information. Yeah, the thalamus is still awake. The thalamus is still working hard for us. It's taking in information that we are experiencing during our dream time, during our meditation times. All those times that we're in the alpha state, it's taking in information. Yeah, talk about mind-blowing. Pun intended, right? So when we're sleeping, our thalamus is still taking in all that information. So go back and remember a dream that you had that you thought, man, that felt so real, right? Like it was really happening, really happening. Our thalamus was taking in all that information and sending it to other parts of our brain. Yeah. And sometimes, sometimes we are in those times of those dreams and we wake up and we're thinking, okay, I got to write that down. And sometimes we do and sometimes we don't, right? We get busy. And sometimes the morning goes by so fast that before we know it, we have to get to work. The telephone rings, you end up talking to somebody. And then we spend part of our day trying to remember that dream. And we get it in snippets and snatches. And we're trying to remember, how did that go? Oh, yeah, I remember this piece. How do you think you're remembering that? That information went through the thalamus and went to other parts of our brain that does storage of information. So sit with that for a little bit and how your spiritual growth, right? Because, as a spiritual being, our dreams bring us so much information, right? Helps us work out our emotional stuff from the day, yes, but it also brings in information to us, from our spiritual teams, from the Creator, giving us information that's needed for our next step, our next experience, or to explain a past experience. Find it fascinating. Fascinating. Okay. Let's see. Look who's in the house. Kimberly's in the house. Hi, Kimberly. Good to have you here. Divine timing. Glad I caught you tonight. Me too, lady. Me too. This is one of the times, Kimberly, I wish that we lived closer together, or maybe jumping on a video chat or something like that and say, look, this is the information I am gathering. And we have had so much information about our spiritual being and our physicalness, like the pineal gland I mentioned earlier. But I don't ever remember having this kind of conversation about the thalamus. Have you? Interesting question. And Rob is saying, is that related to the Indian Brahmas? I'm not 100% sure, but I'm going to say yes. Okay. Because we're talking about chakras. We're talking about chakras. And where did that information come from to us in the West? It came from the East Indies, right? Some of it did. And so I would say yes, but I would have to actually look into that a little bit deeper, Rob. And if you ever do and you come across it, please share it, because that'd be adding to the interest. Clara says, so the thalamus is control center and then goes to other parts of our body so they can take care of the information it's received. Yes. So the information from our physical eyes, let's say, okay, goes in to our thalamus first, identifies it, and then sends it to the different part of our brain that needs that information. And that part of our brain then sends that information to whatever part of our body that needs to react to it. I know that's simplified, but basically that's it in a nutshell. Whether we need to sit up, stand up, talk, what are we going to talk about? Those kinds of things. Yeah, it's a very complex center here in our heads, right? But here's this. It helps us to understand the importance of remembering the connection between our head and our heart, right? Because part of the information that I teach in the class is about our hearts. And the heart is the very first organ that the body creates in that cell division, the mitosis, okay? And at the 512th cell, And that heart, at one point, that's all we were. Every single one of us was a heart. And out of the heart, the very first organ that's born out of the heart is the tongue, right? The brain is a part of that mitosis, yes, but it's not the first organ that is created. It's not the first organ that gets produced out of the heart. The heart is the very first. That's why we have brain cells in our heart, right? Yeah, I know. Fascinating. I keep saying that, but it's true. Kimberly says, I've heard about the hypothalamus, but not about the thalamus on the whole. Exactly. The hypothalamus gets a lot of press from the medical science. It does. But it's the thalamus that is the center of all the information flowing into the brain. Jocelyn says, so does our dreams kind of follow this going through our brain? Yes, it does. It does. Yep. Oh, here's another picture I want to show you. I got to watch the time because I get so excited about this stuff, I'll forget about the time. Okay, so here's a picture of what the thalamus looks like in our bodies, in our heads. So on the left-hand side, you can kind of see what the shape is like. It's kind of, it's an oblong shape. Some people say it actually kind of reminds them of the shape of the heart. But that's what it looks like from a side view. Okay, see how it sits here at the bottom is the spinal cord, the brain stem coming up, right, and right on top of the brain stem. In a view from the back, you can see the spinal cord going up into the brain stem, and see they're two symmetrically identical. That's the thalamus as a whole, but it has two identical sides. And the thing is that when we're talking about this, and in relation to the class that I teach, because it's about remembering, right? And that we are doing this spiritual growth in an environment, Earth, Grandmother Earth, that is a school of polarity. Yeah. And so we have a very important piece, part of our physical brain, the thalamus, that actually has a left side and a right side. They're identical in shape. They're identical, but they have a left and a right. Okay. But if you noticed, there is a connection between those two lobes, right? Yep. Right at the brainstem. So when I was thinking about my own soul growth, my own understanding of how I'm learning and remembering, right, is that, and why I would even in my early years, teenager, I got so consumed by psychology. I thought it was because I loved people watching and wondering, why do they do it that way? Why that? Why did they make that choice? And then I go into this kind of information and I go right back to all of those questions about the why and how. But I can see how my team has led me every step of the way to this information today and yesterday. And actually, I started this 20 years ago with the Merkaba and um, yeah, the flower of life information and that whole piece and how they talk about the brain and awakening illuminated heart. And so it's the understanding of this. For me, this is the nerdiness, right? It helps me to understand at a deeper level intellectually how information comes into my brain, both physical and non-physical information, right? And for those of us that have an activated Merkaba, that light language that is coming through our Merkaba actually helps us to decode, understand that light language better. And so I'm thinking that when that information reaches our thalamus, that's almost like that upgrade. Okay, we just got put into I don't know, business class on the airplane or first class or something. We got that upgrade in understanding the information that's coming in. Rochelle says, very interesting. I know. Karen says, information I get lately is complex, but because I'm someone who learns best in a basic and straightforward way, everything comes to me in an easily understood form. Gotta love the brain. We get the information using our own intellect. Yes. It's like sometimes it reminds me, we talk about sifting information. And so when we're sifting, when I think about that, what I see, what I imagine is either like when we're baking and they tell you to sift the flour and you've got that sifter, and it's moving the flour back and forth and making it finer grain, and so it's taking out all the stuff that we don't need, so it doesn't end up in the baking, in the cookies or the bread. Or I was also an anthropology minor, and I always wanted to go on a dig. And in archaeology, what they also do is they have a sifter. It's just a screen, right, on a frame, and they put the sand and all the debris in it, and they shake it, and they're shaking it so that they can get all the stuff that they don't want, like the sand, out, and what's left in the screen part, in the frame part, is possible information to whatever they're researching. So in a way, our thalamus does the same thing, right? It's taking in all the information, sorting it out, and then sending that information to where it needs to go in other places in our brain. Is there information that it was left out? Possibly. Maybe, it was kind of like in a spam file or something, because, maybe that part of us wasn't healed enough for us to take it in. And so it's being held there. And then once we're able to heal that part of us in those layers, that information then does come through, and it's like, that's our epiphany. That is the aha. Oh my God, I just got that. I don't know why I didn't think about that sooner. Didn't see it sooner. That's just me and my imagination, and how that information could be sitting there without any place to really go. Or maybe it does go there, but it's still sitting there because we don't know what to do with it. So it waits. Some people would call that divine timing. What's the wrong with them? I know. I've said that too as I'm watching people. Yeah. I don't know. Don't get me started, Rob. We'll go down that that path way too easily. Deanna says, "Hello, Neshi. Been listening all along." Hi, Deanna. Deanna and I met in person. She was part of the class, and I have to say, Deanna, I still love your laugh. I tell you what, she is so much fun to be around, and listening to her laugh. Yeah, so good. Oh, thank you, Rochelle. Thank you so much. We're at the top of the hour. Can you believe that? So, if you have any questions about this, let me know. Okay, send me a PM or put it in the comments. Make sure you tag me in the comments so I know that your question is there, and I'll do my best. My best to answer. Now, I have to do a little something here. This is one of my favorite covers of our magazine. We have a magazine that's 6 years old. We have a lot of content in those magazines. And you can actually get single issues. I would encourage you to go to our partners called Mag Cloud, and they have all of our past issues there. And go through and just poke around a bit. We have of course, the cover, but on all of magazines, you can take a look at what is the highlighted articles in that particular issue. And yeah, you never know what you're going to find in them. Let me tell you, lots of good stuff. And so, and you can get the magazine print, digital. That's for any smartphone, tablet. You can also get it as a PDF or as a web viewer, which means that you can see it on your screen, but you're not storing it in your hard drive. So these are the past issues of Star Nations magazine. You can visit our partners at MagCloud and take a look. You never know what you're going to find there. Okay. So I want to say thank you to each one of you for being with me this evening and to share information, your thoughts about this topic, about how our brain is actually a partner in our spiritual growth, and to see it as a part of us, an important part of us that sometimes we kind of diss, right? But we need it just as much as we need our hearts and our emotions. We also need our brain. Okay. All right. Thank you for being here with me. I do appreciate it. And we'll see you next week for Communications from Home on Tuesday. What is that? July? What is that? I don't even know. What is that? I'm going to take a look quick because otherwise I will wonder the entire time. Next Tuesday is July 6th. So we'll see you next Tuesday, July 6th for Communications from Home. Same time, same bat channel. And so Bama Mina, that's Potawatomi for until we see each other again. I love you guys.